He didn't come for applause. He didn't even want a microphone. He just stepped into the echo of a high school gym in small-town America, carrying a shadow box wrapped in an old t-shirt like it might catch cold. The boosters were setting up streamers. Someone tested the fog machine for the halftime show. A few kids laughed when they saw the box. Props for the pep rally? One of them snorted. But the man didn't flinch. He set the box down, uncapped the latches, and showed a thin ribbon, a tarnished coin, and a badge no one knew how to name. "I just wanted to know," he said. "If any of this still means anything." Then the doors opened. A 4-star walked in. "Welcome to Endless Stories, where silence still knows how to stand at attention. If you believe respect isn't a trend and some salutes carry decades, not seconds, stay, subscribe, share this with someone who still says a name when the crowd has moved on. Let's keep the stories that hold us steady." The first sound wasn't the band. It was the squeak of a lone janitor's cart rolling across waxed hardwood. The gym smelled like oranges and old victories. Banners hung from the rafters. State champs in blue and gold. Years stitched into cloth like promises that hadn't quite finished speaking. In the far corner, a fog machine coughed a test puff and turned the last rays of evening into a weak halo that didn't belong to anyone yet. Ray Malloy stepped in unannounced. No one held a door. No one needed to. He moved like the kind of man who had learned to be his own doorman. Steady, polite, taking up as little space as possible while somehow holding the walls up. He carried a shadow box wrapped in a thin gray t-shirt. The cotton had a thumb-worn hole that matched the curve of the glass. He set it down on a folding chair and breathed out, slow, as if someone had told him years ago that air is a ration you don't waste. "Sir? You with the early arrivals." Ms. Price, clipboard, headset, 3 cracked bangles. Glided by without quite stopping. "Back table over there, we'll tag your item." "Thank you," Ray said, because a man who has said thank you in worse rooms has learned to spend it freely. On the baseline, 2 varsity kids filmed a rehearsal intro. Gabe wore a Letterman jacket and a grin too big for the camera frame. Lexi, ponytail too tight, knew exactly where to stand for the best light. They weren't cruel. They were loud the way youth can be, testing how much sound a space will allow before it bounces their voice back with questions. Gabe's lens found the shadow box. He panned without thinking, like you do with things you don't yet understand. "Props department?" He joked to nobody and to everyone. The live chat made the kind of haha faces that forget there are faces behind the glass. Ray didn't hear the words, just the laughter. A texture, not a sentence. He took the t-shirt off the box and thumbed the latch. The glass reflected the gym's halogens and turned them into 2 thin lines across his knuckles. The lid opened on hinges that had been oiled with patience. Inside, a threadbare ribbon that had once been red, white, and blue. A bronze star whose edges had learned every fingerprint he ever had. A unit patch sewed crooked on a black felt square. A St. Christopher coin that had outlasted pockets and promises. He didn't look around before he lifted the coin. Some gestures are private regardless of zip code. He rolled it once, felt the groove from a notch that wasn't factory-made. He set it back where it always goes. "You can put that in the display case by the water fountain," Ms. Price said, returning with new instructions and less time. "We've got the Rotary honoring 2 teachers, the mayor's here for 5 minutes tops, and someone said a general may, don't quote me, show up for a scholarship announcement. Big night." She smiled the way people smile when they're holding 4 things and you're the 5th. "Back table's fine," Ray said. He wasn't here for a case. He wasn't here for cases anymore. He carried the box to the rectangle of plastic tablecloth where they'd parked a pyramid of plaques, all polished within an inch of their names. One red spirit of the school in a font that tried its best. He set the shadow box down beside the trophies and stepped back. If you had asked him, he would have said he just needed to stand near it a while, as if the glass might mist if he walked too far away. Lexi drifted closer, curiosity pulling her like a tide. "What is it?" she asked, not unkind, just used to categories. "Like, museum stuff?" "Not museum," Ray said. "Memory." She read the small brass strip at the bottom, squinting. Raymond P. Malloy, and Key 1970. The letters looked freshly polished not because they were but because he wiped them when no one watched. "Where's an Key? She said, giving the vowels a local accent. Far, he answered and left her to the map. Gabe joined, phone at his side for once. We're doing a segment between the band and awards, he said, adopting a host's voice. We could shout out your shadow box. Give it a hashtag. People love veterans. He didn't mean it the wrong way. He meant it the only way he knew, which was through the camera in his hand. Ray shook his head. No shouting required. The doors at the far end banged twice in the way heavy doors do when someone serious doesn't slow down for hydraulics. A current went through the bleachers as human as breath. The principal looked up from a conversation he hadn't been enjoying, adjusted a tie that needed adjusting, and walked toward the entrance with the particular speed of a man trying to greet an arrival and outrun his own nerves. Is that? Someone whispered. The driver entered first, then stepped aside. The general didn't. He walked in like a quiet answer to a noisy question. No cape of importance billowed behind him. His haircut was regulation if your regulation was memory, not policy. The blue suit was simple. The stars on his shoulder were not. General Elias Warren's eyes did not scan. They landed. They landed on the folding chairs, the streamers, the banner with a smudge where last year's year had been peeled and replaced. Then they landed on the back table and refused to move. He crossed the floor without cutting through anyone's space. Yet everyone found a way to move around him. There's a physics to respect that has nothing to do with lines on a court. He stopped at the table, angled the shadow box away from the glare, and read the small brass strip the way a chaplain reads a name in a chapel empty except for ghosts. Sir, the principal began, hand out, voice ready to paint a welcome in bold strokes. Warren lifted a finger. Polite, not dismissive, the universal sign for one moment. He placed his palm on the glass, not to smudge but to steady, then opened the box with a care that said he had taken similar lids off similar memories. He lifted the bronze star by its ribbon as if weight could be measured in more than ounces. He looked at Ray. Were you the medic? Warren asked. Ray cleared his throat. When they needed one, he said. Warren's jaw worked once, twice, as if a phrase too used to formality was trying to find plain English. He set the bronze star down, pressed his shoulders back until you could have rested a rule across them, and saluted. It was not a long salute. The gym, however, stretched it into something time had to obey. The band kids went still, drumsticks hovering an inch above snare heads. The fog machine sighed, as if embarrassed to be theatrical in the presence of something that didn't need help. Gabe's phone didn't rise. He didn't know why, only that he shouldn't record this. Lexi blinked hard, twice, the way people do when they're filing something in a part of the brain where lists are not allowed. Warren dropped the salute as gently as he had raised it. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, no microphone necessary. Before we honor the future, we honor the dead. No one clapped. They didn't forget. They remembered correctly. The principal's welcome shifted registers without telling his face. We were honored, General. Everyone, please take your seats. He gestured toward the risers and somehow toward the shadow box at the same time, as if both were the stage. Ray's hands, steady as planks, nicked with small white lines of old work, closed the box. He did not latch it. He turned to the general. I didn't come for speeches, he said quietly. I didn't bring any, Warren replied. They shared a smile that could have been mistaken for nothing by anyone who has never had to hold a silence so it doesn't fall and shatter. Then the gym breathed again, but softer. The banner swayed in a breeze no one felt, and the janitor's cart squeaked the way old things do when they're telling you they're still here. Somewhere in the corner, the fog machine finally gave up its ghost. No one missed it. They had something better. A room that had decided to be a room, not a set. And for a moment, one clear, unapologetic moment, every loud thing in America learned how to whisper. General Elias Warren didn't like gymnasiums. He didn't like the way the lights hummed without asking permission, the way the echo took every sound and doubled it like a rumor, or the way banners told victories without ever whispering what they cost. But tonight wasn't about comfort. Tonight was about debt. He walked without hurry, yet without pause, across the polished wood. His shoes clicked once every other stride, a rhythm too disciplined to be accident, too human to be parade. His jacket was blue, his tie darker, his shoulders squared not for effect but from muscle memory. On his chest sat 4 stars, small pieces of metal that meant more work than anyone should ever be allowed to carry. If he had his way, he would have left them in a drawer. But the program said, "Special guest." And Ms. Price had whispered into a dozen phones. And so here he was, another reluctant symbol in a room that didn't know how heavy symbols could get. He was supposed to wait near the bleachers until they called his name. He was supposed to smile, shake a hand, and introduce a scholarship that would put 2 kids through college. He was supposed to deliver 3 minutes of polished gratitude and sit down before the crowd's attention wandered. That was the script. But then he saw the box. The shadow box wasn't in the display case where they kept trophies polished with more energy than truth. It was on a plastic table, too low, too temporary, sitting between spirit of the school plaques and a crooked basket of programs. The glass reflected the overhead lights in pale stripes. Inside was a bronze star, its ribbon fading toward brown, and a small silver coin pressed flat against black felt. The brass plate read, Raymond P. Malloy, and KHE 1970. The name hit him like a door slamming in a quiet hallway. He remembered, not the man, he had never met Ray Malloy before, but the place, the year, the asterisk in the after-action report. Malloy had been listed as refused evacuation. It wasn't common. Men begged for helicopters when the field turned red. But one stayed and carried. He'd read that note in a log once and wondered if the name had survived anywhere outside the paper. And here it was, in brass and glass, hidden beside spirit trophies. Warren stopped walking. The gym went still without knowing why. Students shifted in their folding chairs. The band tapped sticks against knees and then froze. Gabe lowered his phone mid-swipe. Lexi's ponytail stopped swinging. The air knew before the people did. The general stepped to the table, bent down, and opened the box with both hands. He lifted the bronze star by its ribbon, held it against the light. For a second, the metal looked weightless. For him, it was the heaviest thing in the room. He turned toward Ray, whose hands were empty now, resting at his sides like they'd run out of excuses to be useful. "Were you the medic?" Warren asked. His voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that had once given orders in sandstorms and funerals. "When they needed one," Ray replied. "That was all." Warren set the metal back into the felt. His shoulders straightened, chin lifted. He raised his right hand to his brow. The salute was sharp, precise, not for cameras, not for the crowd, not even for Ray. It was for the names carved into Warren's memory, the ones who hadn't gotten this far. It was for Enki, for 1970, for every asterisk that meant stayed behind. The gym fell into silence. Not the hush of politeness, the hush of recognition, the hush of a town realizing it had been standing in the presence of something sacred while pretending it was just another Friday. The principal froze mid-step, hand extended in welcome, suddenly irrelevant. Miss Price lowered her clipboard. The janitor stopped sweeping and leaned against his cart, head bowed. Even the fog machine held its smoke like a breath it couldn't release. Warren lowered his hand slowly, turned to the crowd. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, each word measured. "Before we honor the future, we remember the cost." No one clapped. Not yet. Clapping would have felt like graffiti on marble. Gabe swallowed. His phone, still streaming, showed nothing but the ceiling. Comments poured in. "What's happening?" But he didn't dare tilt the lens back down. Lexi wiped her cheek quickly, as if hoping sweat could pass for tears. The band captain whispered, "At ease," to her players, though no one had been called to attention. Warren turned back to Ray, nodded once. It wasn't a question. It wasn't thanks. It was recognition given soldier to soldier. Then he stepped aside, as though the center of the gym didn't belong to him but to the box, to the man who brought it, to the silence that had finally been earned. The crowd shifted, restless, unsure how to follow something that wasn't in the program. The principal cleared his throat. "We're honored by this moment. Thank you, General. "Thank you, Mr. Malloy. Everyone, please, take your seats." But no one sat right away. They lingered in the hush, some eyes on the metal, some on the man, all on the meaning. For a few minutes, the gym forgot the pep rally, the halftime show, the lights that hummed too loud. It remembered something else, something older, something heavier. Ray closed the box gently, leaving it unlatched. His hands rested on the lid like they'd found the right place to stop moving. He didn't smile either. He didn't need to. The salute had already said everything he'd carried in silence for 50 years. The band director tapped his baton once, tentative, then lowered it. "Not yet," he murmured. And for the first time that night, the gym obeyed. The night didn't have stars. Not the kind you could see anyway. The jungle canopy smothered the sky in black, and the only light came from tracer rounds that burned red lines through the dark like someone scribbling across heaven with fire. Ray Malloy was 23, his boots soaked, his shoulders strapped with a medic bag that weighed more than he did. The orders had been clear: move across the ridge, set up a listening post, be back by dawn. The maps said the hill was empty. The maps were wrong. Halfway up the slope, the first shot cracked. Johnson, tall and too young to shave properly, dropped with a scream that sounded more like surprise than pain. Simmons hit the dirt next, blood blooming through his fatigues faster than Ray could think. The squad dove for cover. Radios hissed static and nothing else. Ray's fingers shook, not from fear but from adrenaline. He'd seen blood before, patched it, stitched it, stopped it with gauze and pressure. But not like this. Not with rounds snapping past his ears and a hill full of shadows that wanted them dead. "Stay down," Sergeant Keene barked, voice rough over the noise. "Air support's 20 out. Hold your line." But Simmons was bleeding out. He clutched at Ray's sleeve, eyes wide, lips pale. Don't let me," his words choked off. Ray didn't wait for orders. Orders could be too late. He crawled through mud, dragging his bag behind him, bullets chewing bark off trees. He pressed gauze hard against Simmons's side, felt warm life spill through anyway. His brain screamed this won't hold, but his hands kept working. "Ray!" someone shouted. Maybe Keene, maybe Johnson. The world blurred into noise and smoke. Then another cry, this one higher, thinner. Johnson hit again. Ray's heart slammed. 2 boys, 2 bleeding out. He couldn't split himself in half, but he tried. He slung Simmons's arm across his shoulders, pulled him up, teeth clenched so tight his jaw ached. Every step dragged fire through the mud. Bullets hissed past. One clipped the strap of his bag. It slid off, spilling bandages into the dirt. He didn't stop. He got Simmons behind a fallen tree, shoved a tourniquet high, prayed it held. Then he crawled back. For Johnson. Johnson wasn't moving. His breath came in ragged gasps, shallow and fast. A hole in his shoulder bled like a faucet. Ray pressed hard, harder than training said, whispering nonsense just to fill the air. "You're not done yet, you hear me? Your mother's waiting. You got a letter in your pocket you haven't mailed. You don't get to leave it unread." Johnson blinked, barely there. And then, out of nowhere, Harlan slid into the dirt beside him. Private first class, 19, freckles that made him look 12. He pressed his own hand over the wound with Ray. "Go," Harlan hissed. "Get Simmons out. I'll stay." Ray shook his head. "You won't hold." Harlan shoved a small coin into Ray's pocket. A St. Christopher medallion, chain snapped. "Then when you carry him, you're carrying me too." Ray had no time to argue. He grabbed Simmons again, hauled him, stumbling down the slope toward the faint hope of medics. Behind him, he heard Harlan's rifle bark, short, controlled bursts. Cover fire. A boy pretending he was older. By the time Ray got Simmons into hands that could help, the hill behind him erupted in fire. He turned back, lungs on fire, legs refusing. But Keene's arm locked him down. "We can't," the sergeant started, but Ray shoved past anyway. He clawed his way up the slope again. The jungle smelled of cordite and iron. Bodies scattered in unnatural poses. He found Johnson breathing shallow but alive. He found Harlan too, still at his post, rifle empty, eyes wide open. The medallion chain was gone. Ray knelt, hands shaking, blood on everything. He wanted to scream. He wanted to wake him up. Instead, he closed Harlan's eyes with 2 fingers. Whispered, "You covered me. I'll cover you." By dawn, helicopters finally came. Dust whipped the ground. Medics shouted. Stretchers filled. Ray rode with Simmons, hands still pressed to a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Johnson groaned, alive by a thread. Harlan rode in silence, zipped. 3 weeks later, in a ceremony Ray didn't attend by choice, an officer pinned a bronze star to his chest. For refusing evacuation, the citation read. Cameras clicked. Someone shook his hand. He felt nothing. The weight of the medal was lighter than the coin in his pocket. Every year after, Ray kept that Street Christopher medallion close. Not because he believed it protected him, because it reminded him of the boy who had pressed it into his palm with the words, "You're carrying me too." And every time he touched it, he knew he still was. General Elias Warren had saluted 1,000 times. In parades, in ceremonies, in desert dawns where the sand still clung to the air like chalk dust. But none of those salutes had ever carried the same weight as the one he gave in that high school gym, standing before a shadow box with Ray Malloy's name on it. Because Warren carried his own ghosts, and they didn't let him sleep. He had been a captain once, long before the 4 stars. Young, proud, too sure of maps and schedules. It was a training exercise in North Carolina. Summer heat thick enough to drown in, recruits green enough to believe orders were scripture. He gave a command that pushed them too fast, too far. One misstep on a live-fire course, and Private Daniel Mercer never got back up. 17 years old. 1 week in uniform. The official report called it an unfortunate accident. But Warren never called it that. He called it his fault. Every Memorial Day after, he wrote letters. Not the kind the Pentagon approved. Handwritten ones, folded twice, addressed to Mercer's parents. He told them what he remembered. The way Daniel tied his boots wrong. The way he hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening. The way he raised his hand too eagerly for every drill. He wrote not because it fixed anything, it didn't, but because silence felt like betrayal. So when he saw Malloy's name in the unit log decades later, asterisk beside refused evacuation, he remembered. He remembered thinking, here's a man who carried what I dropped. And now, in this gym, he couldn't stay a symbol on a stage. He had to be a witness. Warren kept his eyes on the box as the principal fumbled with a microphone. Tonight, the man announced, voice too cheery for the room. We gather to honor the future of our youth. But before we do, we have the great privilege of welcoming General Elias Warren. Applause tried to rise. Warren lifted a hand and it died in the air. He didn't climb the stage. He stayed beside the table, beside the box. This medal, he said, loud enough for the bleachers but quiet enough to sound like confession, is not about value, not about display. It's about cost. Cost silence. Cost blood. It cost names. He turned toward Ray, who stood still as granite, arms folded over nothing but time. I read your name once, Warren continued, long ago, in a report that said you refused evacuation. They make that sound like heroism, but I know it was something else. Duty, guilt, love, the things no medal can carry, but a man must. The gym was hushed. Even the buzz of the lights seemed to fade. Too many of us, Warren went on, voice tightening, have medals we trade back in a heartbeat if it meant one more voice at roll call. I have my own regrets. A boy named Mercer. He never made it past week 1 because I thought speed mattered more than safety. His parents deserved better. And I can't give it to them. Not now. Not ever. He paused, looked at the bleachers. Rows of teenagers, coaches, parents, all expecting pep rally rhythm and finding funeral cadence instead. Don't mistake what you see here, Warren said, gesturing to the bronze star. This isn't about glory. It's about the debt the living owe the fallen. Debt that doesn't go away when the shooting stops. Men like Mr. Malloy don't ask to be remembered. They remember everyone else. That's what makes them heavier than any rank I've ever worn. Ray didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was testimony enough. Ms. Price, clipboard shaking in her hands, whispered something to the principal. He leaned close. She said it again, louder this time. "Rename the scholarship," she urged. The principal blinked. "To what?" "To the one he carried," Warren said, catching her words. His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet now. "Name it the Harlan Scholarship." Gasps rippled through the room. Lexi lowered her phone. Gabe mouthed the name silently, like it was foreign and holy all at once. Warren's gaze never left the box. "If we honor the future, let it be with the truth of the past. A boy gave his coin so another could carry a man out of fire. That boy deserves a place in this gym. On this night. Forever." The crowd didn't cheer. They stood. Every one of them. Some awkwardly, some slowly, but all upright. Because respect isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just legs refusing to stay seated. Warren closed the box with care, then placed his palm flat against the glass. "Mercer, Harlan, Johnson, Simmons," he said softly, naming them not as ghosts but as guides. "These are the teachers tonight." He turned back to the students, voice sharpening. "Learn this lesson well. Courage isn't in the medals. It's in the names behind them. Names you have to say out loud, or else the silence eats them." And with that, he stepped back. Not toward the podium, not toward the spotlight, but toward Ray. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the veteran. Two men separated by decades but bound by debt. The principal, shaken out of his script, tried again. Please welcome General Warren," he said, voice trembling. But the crowd didn't clap. They didn't need to. They just stood, breathing the silence. And in that silence, Warren finally felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness, not release, but the knowledge that regret can be carried lighter when it's carried together. The gym had never been this quiet. Not during graduation, not during prayer before a championship, not even during the blackout in '98 when the lights went out and everyone held their breath. This silence wasn't empty. It was full. Ray stood with the shadow box half open, the bronze star glinting faintly in the halogen glow. Warren stood beside him, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The crowd, students, parents, teachers, the mayor, wasn't sure what to do. Their hands hovered as if wanting to clap, their voices stuck in throats. But no one moved. Then, from the bleachers, Lexi raised her phone. Not high, not in livestream mode, just to snap a single still photo. She didn't add filters, didn't add text. Later, she would post it with one word. Listen. But in the moment, she just lowered her phone and bowed her head. Something shifted. The band director, an old man with white hair curling from under his cap, lifted his baton. He tapped it against the stand once. The drummers tightened their grips. But then he stopped. "Not tonight," he whispered. He set the baton down as though even music would be noise too loud. The cheer squad, huddled in matching sweaters at the side of the court, started a slow clap. Instinct. Habit. But the captain, Elena, Jr., sharp-eyed, held up a hand. "No," she said. "We don't clap. We stand." She rose to her feet, chin high, and the rest followed. Within seconds, the whole gym was standing. No one instructed them. They just did it. Ms. Price, who had organized a dozen of these events with checklists and scripts, dropped her clipboard. Paper scattered across the hardwood, but she didn't bend to pick them up. She walked to the table, eyes wet, and laid down something small. A locket, worn gold. "My brother's," she whispered. "He never came home from Desert Storm." A ripple began. A math teacher stepped forward, pulling off his tie. From his pocket, he drew out a ring on a chain. "My father's," he said simply, setting it beside the locket.